We now continue into 1 Corinthians chapter 7, where Sha'ul brings covenant order to marriage, celibacy, desire, duty, peace, and calling, urging the assembly to live with disciplined devotion in whatever station Yehovah has assigned. This chapter contains no explicit Tanakh groundings. Even without the citations listed, the chapter stands firmly in covenant continuity. Sha'ul is not inventing a new ethic. He is applying Yehovah's long-standing concern for holiness, faithfulness, peace, and ordered household life to a pressured assembly living in a difficult age. The burden is clear. Do not live by impulse, panic, or self-claiming. Live by calling, restraint, and undivided devotion before Yehovah. Marriage ordered, to celibacy honored, to separation addressed, to calling stabilized, to time shortened, to devotion guarded. Remain faithful where called, and live with undivided devotion. Yehovah, steady us in the place you have assigned. Teach us faithfulness, restraint, and peace. Make our hearts undivided before you. Yehovah, shalom. Yehovah of peace, who calls his people to ordered, faithful, and peaceable living before him. Shalom. Yehovah, shalom. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Holy, holy, holy. Please fill me and lead me, and cover me and stir me, and speak through me with your Ruach HaKodesh, that I may speak your written words with boldness and humility to those who listen. I ask all these things in Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ, the Messiah, the Anointed, the Aleph and the Tav's name. Amen. We'll start with the Shema. Listen and obey. Children of Yehovah, pay careful attention and respond. Yehovah is our power and authority. Yehovah works in unity, echad, with himself, and you shall act upon your love, ahava, to Yehovah with your power and authority, with your thoughts and mind, with your entire body, and with all the muchness that you have. Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. Hand, behold, nail, behold. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Now, to deal with the questions you wrote about, is it good for a man to keep away from women? Well, because of the danger of sexual immorality, let each man have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. The husband should give his wife what is entitled to in the marriage relationship, and the wife should do the same for her husband. The wife is not in charge of her own body, but her husband is. Likewise, the husband is not in charge of his own body, but the wife is. Do not deprive each other except for a limited time by mutual agreement, and then only, so as to have extra time for prayer, but afterwards come together again. Otherwise, because of your lack of self-control, you may succumb to the adversary's temptation. I am giving you this as a suggestion, not as a command. Actually, I wish everyone were like me, but each has his own gift from God. One this, another that. Now to the single people and the widows I say that it is fine if they remain unmarried like me, but if they can't exercise self-control, they should get married, because it is better to get married than to keep burning with sexual desire. To those who are married I have a command, and it is not from me but from the Master. A woman is not to separate herself from her husband, but if she does separate herself, she is to remain single or be reconciled with her husband. Also, a husband is not to leave his wife. To the rest I say, I, not the Master, if any brother has a wife who is not a believer, and she is satisfied to go on living with him, he should not leave her. Also, if any woman has an unbelieving husband who is satisfied to go on living with her, she is not to leave him. For the unbelieving husband has been set aside for God by the wife, and the unbelieving wife has been set aside for God by the brother. Otherwise, your children would be unclean. But as it is, they are set aside for God. But if the unbelieving spouse separates himself, let him be separated. In circumstances like this, the brother or sister is not enslaved. God has called you to a life of peace. For how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband, or how will you know, husband, whether you will save your wife? Only let each person live the life the Master assigned him, and live it in the condition he was in when God called him. This is the rule I lay down in all the congregations. Was someone already circumcised when he was called? Then he should not try to remove the marks of circumcision. Was someone uncircumcised when he was called? He shouldn't undergo brit milah. Being circumcised means nothing, and being uncircumcised means nothing. What does it mean? Something if keeping God's commandments. Each person should remain in the condition he was in when he was called. Were you a slave when you were called? Well, don't let it bother you. Although if you can gain your freedom, take advantage of the opportunity. For a person who was a slave when he was called is the master's freedman. Likewise, someone who was a free man when he was called is a slave to the Messiah. You were bought with a price, so do not become slaves of other human beings. Brothers, let each one remain with God in the condition which he was called. Now the question about unmarried. I do not have a command from the master, but I offer an opinion as one who, by the master's mercy, is worthy to be trusted. I support that in time of stress like the present, it is good for a person to stay as he is. That means that if a man has a wife, he should not seek to be free of her. And if he is unmarried, he should not look for a wife. But if you marry, you do not sin. And if a girl marries, she does not sin. And it's just that those who get married will have the normal problems of married life. And I will rather spare you. What I am saying, brothers, is that there is not much time left. From now on, a man with a wife should live as he has none, and those who are sad should live as if they weren't, those who are happy as if they weren't, and those who deal in worldly affairs and if not engrossed in them, because the present scheme of things in this world won't last much longer. What I want is for you to be free of concern. An unmarried man concerns himself with the master's affairs, with how to please the master. But the married man concerns himself with the world's affairs, and how he will please his wife. And he finds himself split. Likewise, the woman who is no longer married, or the girl who has never been married, concerns herself with the master's affairs, with how to be holy, both physically and spiritually. But the married woman concerns herself with the world's affairs and how to please her husband. I'm telling you this for your own benefit, not to put restrictions on you. I am simply concerned that you live in a proper manner and serve the master with undivided devotion. Now, if a man thinks he is behaving dishonorably by treating his fiancée this way, and if there is strong sexual desire so that marriage is what ought to happen, then let him do what he wants. He is not sinning. Let them get married. But if a man has firmly made up his mind, being under no compulsion, but having complete control over his will, if he has decided with himself to keep his fiancée a virgin, he will be doing well. So the man who marries his fiancée will do well, and the man who doesn't marry will do better. A wife is bound to her husband as long as he lives, but if the husband dies, she is free to marry anyone she wishes, provided he is a believer in the master. However, in my opinion, she will be happier if she remains unmarried, and in saying this, I think I have God's Spirit. What is the Hebrew word that encapsulates this chapter? Shalom. Peace. This chapter presses the ordered covenant peace of marriage, singleness, and daily calling. Tanakh spine. No explicit Tanakh citations are listed. Even so, the chapter carries clear covenant continuity. Yehovah has always cared about holiness in the body, faithfulness in covenant bonds, peace in the household, and obedience within one's assigned station. Sha'ul applies those enduring burdens to marriage, celibacy, separation, and daily life with sober pastoral wisdom rather than restless self reinvention. Chapter flow. Sha'ul begins by answering matters Corinthians has raised concerning marriage and sexual restraint. He acknowledges the goodness of celibate restraint, yet immediately places that counsel within the reality of temptation and human weakness. Because of sexual immorality, each man is to have his own wife and each woman her own husband, establishing covenant faithfulness rather than indulgent wandering. Husband and wife are then commanded to render to one another the marital duty that belongs within the covenant bond. Neither spouse is presented as autonomous over his or her own body in the marriage relationship. There is mutual belonging and mutual responsibility. Temporary abstinence is allowed only by mutual agreement for a season of prayer, and then they are to come together again so that Satan does not exploit lack of self control. Sha'ul clarifies that some of this is concession rather than command, while also expressing he has his own application for singleness. Yet he refuses to absolutize his own state. Each has his own gift from God, one in this way and another in that. To the unmarried and widows, he says it is good to remain as he is. But if they do not have self control, they should marry. For it is better to marry than to burn. To the married, he gives not merely his opinion, but the master's command. A wife should not separate from her husband, and the husband should not divorce his wife. If separation does occur, the path of restraint and reconciliation, not casual relationship disorder. Sha'ul then addresses mixed marriages where one spouse believes the other does not. If the unbelieving spouse is willing to remain, the believer should not initiate separation because sanctifying influence and household holiness are present in the arrangement. But if the unbelieving partner departs, the believer is not enslaved in such a case. Yehovah has called us to peace. Sha'ul then broadens the burden. As Yehovah has assigned to each person, and as the Master has called each one, so let him walk. He applies this principle to circumcision and uncircumcision, showing that external status is not the central issue. What matters is keeping God's commands. He applies the same logic to slavery and freedom. Do not be consumed with the outward station, though lawful freedom may be embraced if given. The deeper truth is that the called belong to the Master. Therefore, no earthly category can finally define them. Then Sha'ul returns to the unmarried and to the virgins, speaking with pastoral judgment shaped by the present distress. Because the time is short, believers must hold earthly conditions with sobriety. Those with wives should not be absorbed with those who mourn or rejoice, being ruled by passing conditions. Those who use the world without becoming engrossed in it. The world in its present form is passing away. For that reason, Sha'ul values singleness for its freedom from divided concerns, since the unmarried can attend more directly to the things of the Master. The married, by contrast, must also care for the concerns of spouse and household, which creates real division of attention. He says this not to trap anyone, but to promote what is fitting and to secure undistracted devotion to the Master. The chapter closes by allowing marriage where appropriate, honoring liberty under obedience, while still affirming that some conditions may be more advantageous to the present moment. Desire governed, to covenant guarded, to peace chosen, to calling stabilized, to devotion undivided. Core theme. Sha'ul's burden in this chapter is not flatten every believer into the same life pattern, but to bring holy order to a confused assembly tempted by extremes. So we're likely tempted to despise marriage in the name of spirituality. Others likely treated bodily desire without enough gravity. Sha'ul refuses both errors. Marriage is honorable, singleness is honorable. What matters is faithfulness, self-control, peace, and undivided devotion in the state Yehovah has assigned. The chapter is deeply practical, but not shallow. Sha'ul sees marriage, celibacy, separation, and ordinary labor through an eschatological lens. The time is shortened, the form of this world is passing, therefore believers must not be ruled by panic, appetite, or worldly identity. They are to live in ordered fidelity, not grasping at a different station, as though external rearrangements were salvation. At the center is calling, whether married or unmarried, bound or free. Each believer belongs to the Master. That belonging relativizes every earthly condition without making it meaningless. Sha'ul therefore presses to stable obedience. Remain faithful where you are unless obedience clearly requires otherwise, and seek to live with peace, chastity, and undistracted devotion before Yehovah. How can we learn to love Yehovah with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength? Love Yehovah by receiving our present calling with faithfulness instead of restless dissatisfaction. Love Yehovah by honoring holiness in the body, whether through covenant marriage or disciplined restraint. Love Yehovah by seeking undivided devotion rather than letting earthly roles swallow our allegiance. How can we love our neighbors as we love ourselves and as Yeshua loves us? Honor spouse, household, and covenant duties with steadiness rather than selfish withdrawal. Refuse relational chaos by pursuing peace, reconciliation, and truthful boundaries. Respect the differing gifts and callings of others without forcing one life pattern on all. How can we bear one another's burdens? Support the married in fidelity and unmarried in purity without shaming either calling. Walk with those facing separation or household strain so they are not left alone in distress. Help one another live soberly in the present age with peace and undistracted devotion. What are the top 3 fruits of the Spirit found in this chapter? 1. Self-control, risun. Sha'ul repeatedly calls for discipline, conduct, and desire, restraint, and relational duty. 2. Faithfulness, imunah. The chapter presses believers to remain steady in covenant bonds and in the calling assigned by Yehovah. 3. Peace, shalom. Yehovah has called his people to peace in marriage, separation, and daily station. What is the mitzvah response Torah-based? Deuteronomy 10, verse 12. So now, Israel, all that Yehovah your God asks from you is to fear Yehovah your God, follow his ways, love him, and serve Yehovah your God with all your heart and with all your being. Command. We will remain faithful in our calling and serve Yehovah with undivided devotion. What is the Hebrew declaration? Na'amod, ba chriya, ashir, ba, kara'anu, Elohim, bi shalom, o vi nachoyom, na ovod et Yehovah, le vavenu, yi, shilem, le fanev. We will stand in the calling on which God has called us. In peace and purity, we will serve Yehovah. Our heart will be whole before him. What is the one-sentence summary? Remain faithful where called, with peace and undivided devotion. Now, after having read the chapter and going over it, here are some heart-piercing questions. Am I restless in my present calling instead of faithful within it? Another. Do I honor holiness in the body with the seriousness Sha'ul requires? Another. Where am I tempted toward relational disorder instead of covenantal peace? Another. Have I made an earthly condition seem like a key to spiritual wholeness? Another. What divides my devotion and keeps my heart from quiet faithfulness? Another. How can I better support others in marriage, singleness, and household strain? Lastly, what would undistracted devotion to Yehovah look like for me this week? End with a Arianic blessing using the name. Yehovah will kneel before you presenting gifts, and he will guard you with a hedge of protection. Yehovah will illuminate the wholeness of his being towards you, bringing order, and he will provide you with love, sustenance, and friendship. Yehovah will lift up the wholeness of his being and look upon you, set in place all you need to be whole and complete. Shalom, shalom. We now continue